The new megalopolis. Our focus on cities is wrong. Growth and innovation come from new urban corridors. China is not the world's most ferocious new economic competitor. The exploding East Coast corridor from Beijing to Shanghai is. India as a whole is not developing high tech industries and attracting jobs, but the booming mega region stretching from Bangalore to Hyderabad is across the world. In fact, nations don't spur growth so much as dynamic regions. Modern versions of the original megalopolis, a term coined by the geographer Jean Gottman to identify the sprawling Boston, New York, Washington economic power corridor. The new megas are the real economic organizing units of the world and the major sources of global wealth, attracting a large share of its talent and generating the most innovation. They take shape as powerful complexes of multiple cities and suburbs often stretching across national borders, forming a vast expanse of trade, transport, communications, and talent. Yet, despite the fact that the rise of regions has been apparent for more than a decade, no one has collected systematic information on them, not the World Bank, not the IMF, not the United Nations, not the global consulting firms. That's why a team of geographers set about building a world map of the new megas, shaped by satellite image of the world at night using light emissions to define the outlines of each region and additional data in categories such as population and economic growth to chart their relative peak strengths and dynamism. The result is the topographical map you see here. The map makes it clear that the global economy takes shape around perhaps 20 great megas, half in the United States and the rest scattered throughout the world. These regions are home to just 10% of total world population, 6,060 million people, but produce half of all economic activity, two-thirds of world-class scientific activity, and three-quarters of global innovations. The great urbanologist Jan Jacobs was the first to describe why megalopolises grow. When people migrate to one place, they all become more productive, and the place itself becomes much more productive because collective creativity grows exponential. Ideas flow more freely, are homed more sparsely, and can be put into practice more quickly. There is, however, a tipping point. The forces of price and congestion begin pushing people away from the center. But make no mistake, this has nothing to do with the decentralization of work. As many have argued, the huge economic advantages of clustering still guide the process, which is why second cities emerge which is why second cities emerge near big cities or in the corridors between them, not in the middle of nowhere. The fourth region to achieve mega status and still the biggest mega in economic terms is the Boston to Washington corridor. In 1960, it was home to about 32 million people. Today, its population has risen to 55 million, more than 17% of all Americans. The region generates $42.5 trillion in economic activity, making it the world's fourth largest economy, bigger than France or the United Kingdom. Next in line is Cheapest, the great, the great, the great Midwestern mega running from Chicago to Detroit, Cleveland, and Pittsburgh with $242.3 trillion in economic activity. Three of the power centers of the U.S. economy even beyond, stretch beyond American borders. Schuylkill runs from Los Angeles to San Diego across the Mexican border to Tijuana. Thorbab Chester sprawls from Toronto to Rochester, and Cascadia from Portland, Oregon to Vancouver. Aside from the island-bound financial center of Greater London, Europe's major economic engines do not rely on old borders to define themselves. The, the Euro lowlands cuts across four nations: the Netherlands, Belgium, Germany, and France. The Euro, the Euro Sunbelt, the Euro Sunbelt, the Euro Sunbelt stretches from Barcelona to Marseille, attracting people and firms with competitive goods and the Mediterranean goods, coast and the Mediterranean lifestyle. Japan is less a country than a network of linked megaregions, encoded by Greater Tokyo. Indeed, a close look at the light emissions map shows that its three major megas may well be blurring into one supermega of more than 100 million people. While megaregions power advanced economies, they literally define the emerging nations. If you removed its megas, China would be virtually meaningless. China would be virtually meaningless as an economic category. What matters are Shanghai to Nanjing, with more than 50 million people, Hong Kong to Shenzhen, 40 million, Greater Beijing, 36 million, Greater Beijing, 36 million. These three megas account for most of Chinese economic output, attract most of its talent, and generate the great majority of its innovations. Instead of technology helping to spread economic opportunity and lift many more boats, economic power is concentrating in a small number of key regions. It's time for political and economic leadership to wake up to this new reality. It makes little sense to dwell on countries anymore, when the real engines of survival, innovations, and growth are the new megas. Are the new and growth are the new megas.